Hong Kong's police watchdog has released a much-anticipated report into the way the force handled the violent anti-government protests that erupted last June. The report says police acted within guidelines, although there is room for improvement. Among the recommendations, a review of the use of tear gas and more training for officers. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has accepted the recommendations.
I'm not naive to think that the publication of the report or my response to the report, even accepting all the recommendations for implementation, will put an end to this social unrest. But at least we will make every attempt to follow through the recommendations.
The Independent Police Complaints Council is an internal department, and its members are appointed by Mrs. Lam. Pro-democracy lawmakers have slammed the report, saying it turned a blind eye to police brutality. Roland Lim tells us more.
The long-awaited report, just short of 1,000 pages, concluded that there was room for improvement in how the force dealt with anti-government protests since last June. More than 8,300 people have been arrested since the protests began. Now, Anthony Neo, chairman of the IPCC, says the report's purpose, though, was only to present the facts, a fact-finding study for the purposes of enhancing police training and internal guidelines. Now, there was no attributing of faults on particular individuals or looking into individual complaints against police officers. The report went on to state that the reputation of the force had been damaged during the unrest and raised concerns about the increasing level of violence. Mr. Neo also defended the use of force by officers in policing during these months of unrest.
We have seen, in fact, protests which originally were peaceful. They then degenerated into violent protests, using weapons of all kinds, in fact, against police and others. Property was destroyed. And this was the situation that our police force was faced with. When they are faced with this situation, of course, they have to enforce the law and they have to protect themselves. And that is the situation that we had in Hong Kong.
In some of the more intense clashes during the months of unrest, protesters dressed in black, wearing masks, threw petrol bombs at police and government officers, storming the Legislative Council building, trashed railway stations, as well as blocking roads. Police responded with tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, and several live rounds fired into the air. The IPCC made 52 recommendations, a review of the police force's operational command structure, more training to its officers, and clearer guidelines on the use of weapons.
I don't think that there is anything which is systemic as such. There is something which, because the police does have all these systems, so I don't believe the police force as an institution, in fact, has fallen below what I would consider to be, in fact, sufficient systems of management and guidelines.
On one of the more controversial events last year, the Yuen Long station attack last July, the IPCC concluded that the police failure to take timely action in certain instances did fuel allegations of collusion against the police, but stressed that it was beyond the remit of the IPCC to determine any question of collusion. Now, in the Yuen Long attack, about 100 white-clad men armed with wooden sticks and metal poles attacked civilians and protesters, leaving 45 people in hospital. Police were accused of colluding with the thugs by arriving late at the scene. The IPCC also backed the police over their handling of the controversial decision to storm the Prince Edward station last August as well, when trying to arrest protesters fleeing the scene. Now, it also dismissed rumors that people had died during that operation or that the police had impeded ambulance staff, although the force was chided by the IPCC for firing tear gas at the station in close range and using pepperball weapons as well at close range. Anti-extradition bill protesters will not be satisfied with this report. Demonstrators have long demanded an independent probe into police conduct led by a judge because they say the IPCC doesn't have investigative powers and cannot summon witnesses. Back in December, a panel of 5 overseas policing experts also quit this particular fact-finding study, saying that the IPCC needs more powers if it is to conduct a meaningful investigation.